So Alabama fans are about ready to burst at the seams. They're going a little bit crazy right now. In fact, if you know an Alabama fan, I would gladly check in on them just to see where their psyche is. Because it's one thing to lose your head coach after 17 illustrious seasons plus 6 national titles, but it's another thing to start poaching away that talent like it's just common household items on the shelves. That's what's going on in Tuscaloosa a week into the Kalen DeBoer era. Even with a lot of positivity coming on his staff, there's a lot of now animosity and questions residing the future of this program. But when is the actual moment to hit the panic button in the Kalen DeBoer era? Have we reached that point? Are we even near that point? In my personal opinion, no, but let's go ahead and discuss. However, if you are new here, welcome on into the channel, people. My name is Cole Thompson. I'm a radio show host based in Houston, and I talk college football daily. So if this is the fix that you need to survive the dreaded offseason of not having Saturday football on your screens, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts on Alabama and the max exodus of players entering the portal. Tell your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, best of bros, especially Alabama fans, so I can talk them off the ledge, but college football aficionados everywhere about this channel, because we are on the race to become the #1 YouTube show talking college football daily. Go ahead and subscribe to me on every social media platform. I call it Twitter, you call it X, we all call it Instagram, at Mr. Cole Thompson. That way, conversations surrounding our favorite sport never have to stop flowing. Alabama was always going to lose players in the portal. This is not an uncommon thing. The uncommon part is losing this type of talent in the portal. You'll see a third string wide receiver and a number 3 quarterback always look for grandeur pastures. And you got that this past year. Kobe Pretense entered the portal very early on. You lost Eli Holstein. He's now going to Pitt. But it's the type of talent that you're saying goodbye to, and not in terms of going to Sundays. You're watching Isaiah Bond now become public enemy #1 in Austin as he resides with Steve Sarkisian in the Longhorns. Caleb Downs, who was an enforcer and arguably Alabama's best player this past season, is now in the portal, and there's a lot of speculation he'll return home to Georgia and match up with Coach T-Rob and become a staple of the Bulldogs defense. Caden Proctor, your long-term answer at left tackle, is now also in the portal. I think that we can all agree that the Iowa native who was going down to the wire with Iowa is probably pretty content of going back to Kirk Ferentz. But the amount of talent that you are seeing leave, not to mention names that still are considering leaving, including Justice Haynes, the 5-star running back, is a bit concerning. But why should you not panic yet? Because number one, let's just get this out of the way. This was always going to happen. I can tell you from the foreground of everything, this was going to be a reality check for Kalen DeBoer and his new staff. And for Alabama fans everywhere, you're used to seeing everyone in college football go through this mass plague once in a blue moon where a surplus of talent decides to depart and go elsewhere. Yeah, that's very common in this sport. And you, as the kings of college football, have sat back and pondered and chuckled along the way when LSU loses an excess amount of talent, and Texas A&M does, and Tennessee does, and Florida does. You were probably cackling all the way home knowing that the Gators were getting chomped at the bits during early signing period as more recruits said, thanks, but no thanks, Billy Napier. I'm not ready to go ahead and play for your program. That just is a common thing for Bama fans. You've never been on this side of the wall, but to everybody else in college football, welcome to the normality, Tuscaloosa. This is always common. And so you are not precedent of not feeling the same pain that has been inflicted on fans throughout the SEC, the Big 12, the Big 10, the Pac-12, RIP to that conference, every single season. This happens, but you're Alabama. And the problem with you being Alabama is you had the ultimate trump card. You had the one thing that was at your disposal that nobody else could say. We have Nick Saban. We have Nick Saban. As long as we have Nick Saban, we're in a good spot. And I've even said on multiple different videos with this programming that as long as Nick Saban is not hanging up the whistle, Alabama stands a shot. We go back to week 2, where everyone was starting to say, this is the moment where everything comes crashing down. They just lost by 10 to Texas. At home, Steve Sarkisian marched in over 300 passing yards for Quinn Ewers. What's Nick Saban do? Well, he has arguably his worst performance of all time against South Florida in a win, and this includes, of course, the Louisiana Monroe debacle, but then he realizes what's the problem and fixes it immediately. They go on an epic run through the SEC, and they make it to the college football playoff. This is, however, the rest of college football. So if you're expecting people to go ahead and say, Alabama fans, we feel bad for you, that your reign of terror with Kalen DeBoer at the helm is over, You were never going to get that ever. It was actually kind of funny to think that people would feel bad for those in Tuscaloosa, that they're now feeling the same pain that was inflicted on their programs for years on end. But here's why this isn't a big deal to me, because of it's very normal. And because of that, you also know that a bunch of other programs are going through the same thing as you. While the portal giveth, the portal also taketh. And you can take a lot of talent that eventually is going to hit and end up becoming a big time game. You look at the names that are leaving Seattle right now. There are definitely a bunch of players that I think could easily transition to the SEC. Perfect example, Jeremy Bernard. That is a kick returner, star wide receiver that eventually could find his way to be a legit number one wherever he lands, whether that be in the Big 12, whether that be in the ACC, whether that be with Alabama underneath Ryan Grubb. There was a reason why he decided to hitch his wagon to Kalen DeBoer in this offense when he initially entered the transfer portal last year. So if you think that he can't find success down in Tuscaloosa, you'd be sadly mistaken. The same thing goes for Jabbar Muhammad. The same thing goes with multiple offensive linemen that were a part of a Joe Moore award-winning class. And as long as they have an understanding of the concept, their transition from one school to another is a lot more potent. The other thing that doesn't worry me right now is that since you should have gotten the idea that this was always going to be a thing, that should have lessened your expectations. That's not saying that you can't go ahead and run through the SEC, finish with maybe one loss or two, and still make the college football playoff. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is that if you thought you were going to be the fortitude of college football, you were sadly mistaken. You could get there at some point, and it won't shock me underneath a guy like Kalen DeBoer. Proven winner, done it everywhere in the college football landscape, and has done it at every level. Won't be able to bring that same type of success down at Bryant-Denny Stadium. That does not shock me in the slightest. What does is that knowing that this is going to be a common case. So here's the bottom line. As long as he is still having the transfer portal window open, he can tell as many players, hey, you want to come back here and be a part of something special? And he can target players that he already knows, has relationships with, builds an identity, and builds a culture in his image. And he's not going that far off the beaten path. Nick Sabin is still going to be a part of this program in some capacity as an advisor, as evident by Greg Byrne. So he's already made it abundantly clear. I want advice from Sabin. And you would be foolish not to take advice from Sabin. The advice doesn't always have to come with how to call plays on the field. It doesn't always have to come with how to game plan for certain opponents or certain coaches. The advice can come with reaching out to the right people when it comes to building a roster, and especially when it comes to reaching the right coaches and the right funds. One thing about Nick Sabin, he's very well known, and more importantly, he's very well seasoned in this game, all across the landscape of college football. And so he knows the right boosters, and he knows the right landscape, and he knows the right players and where they reside across this country and where you need to target, which was a big difference why he was built completely on his own level compared to everybody else in the world of recruiting. Everyone wants to focus in on what we've seen from what Kirby Smart's doing and what Lincoln Riley has done and what even a guy like Ryan Day has done, and especially Jim Harbaugh. And you could throw Mike Norvell and Lane Kiffin into the mix. They all had to have a baseline somewhere. You know where that came from? Nick expanding the horizons. And with that also came with knowing who to talk to when it came to get the proper funds. Now, Kalen DeBoer has that in his ear to where he can listen in on conversations, take the advice of somebody who's been in his shoes before, and be able to create his own culture with the similar feel that made Alabama a dynasty. I don't worry about Alabama because this is happening everywhere in college football. The butterfly effect that was always going to create an atom bomb in our sport came down crashing, and it's now hurt a multitude of programs, especially when you look at places that you never even thought were going to be possible. Imagine telling yourself a few years ago that San Jose State was going to be affected by the retirement of Nick Saban. You would have called yourself crazy, but that's the world we live in. And also, South Alabama was affected. Buffalo was affected because their acting head coaches are coming down to be assistants at a Power 5 school rather than run their own team. That's the way that this was always going to work. So, Alabama fans, do me a favor. Come back off the ledge, drink an ice cold soda, go ahead and have a Coke, and relax. You are always going to lose talent because people connect to people. People don't always commit to a program. They don't always commit to the script day with the big, bold SEC brand attached to it. They commit to those who sell the program. That's a key element when it comes to recruiting. You don't have to sell the program as much as you have to sell your image, your beliefs, your expectations. And if people gravitate to that, They want to be a part of it wherever you may be. Arch Manning is a perfect example of this. Guy can go ahead and be a millionaire in NIL and also a starting quarterback in about, I would say, 120 different schools across the country. But he's committed to Steve Sarkisian. That's why when anyone brings up these conversations about him entering the portal, I just sit back and laugh because he's not going anywhere. You want to know why? Because Sark's not going anywhere. And as long as Nick Saban and as long as Coach T-Rob and as long as all these other personnel members were going to be on staff, you weren't losing the talent. But just like as you're seeing in Arizona, just like you're seeing in Washington, just like you're seeing all across the college football landscape this past offseason, Texas A&M getting involved with it. It happens. This is a common occurrence. So just remember, you're right back at square one. Square one does not always mean that you hit the reset button. It just means you have to go back to the beginning and create your own legacy. There's a lot of positivity still in Tuscaloosa and a lot of upside. Maybe not national championship year one persona underneath DeBoer, but who would have thought that Sonny Dykes was going to lead his team to a national championship appearance in year one in Fort Worth? Who was going to think that Kalen DeBoer coming from Fresno State was going to take a 4-8 roster and bring it on an epic run to go 25-3 over 2 years? Who thought that Mike Elko, of all people, would go from Texas A&M and take over a 3-9 roster only to finish 9-4 at Duke? And who really thought that David Braun was going to take a supposed to be winless Northwestern roster and bring it to 8-5 and nearly represent the Big Ten West? Who would have thought that? Nobody. So it doesn't mean it can't happen, but welcome to the normalcies of college football, Alabama fans. It's been 17 years since you've been able to feel like another member of the college football community, and roughly about 6 years since the transfer portal became a massive glaring factor whenever it came to building rosters. Doesn't mean it's going to be over. It just means you're part of the problem. And just like every other coach that's out there, they have to find the solution. How do you find your solution? Could take overnight. Could take a couple of weeks, could take a full season, but make no mistake. Everything that you see unfolding was always going to happen the second that Nick Saban decided to hang up the whistle and go kiss Miss Terry for good. It was always going to happen. Doesn't mean you have a problem with the program. It just means the program is currently under construction. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that video. Don't hit the X button yet. Make sure you hit subscribe to keep up with all of our daily content found on Just Saying It and anything else that we post on this channel. Bye.